Hi, I'm Bob Roth, Managing Partner and Co-founder of Cypress Home Care Solutions. Since 1994, we've been helping older adults in the Phoenix community age gracefully and safely in the place they call home. Since 2014, I've been bringing you Health Futures, Taking Stock in You, a show dedicated to helping you live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Health Futures. I am really excited about the guest I have here today. I have got in the studio with me, I got Cindy Weinstein. She wrote a book. It's called Finding the Right Words. And we got connected, and the universe is really, really small. We got connected through a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Danny Cabral. She's a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and she had Cindy on her podcast. So Cindy reached out to me, and I want to frame today's conversation and really talk about it's something that we all really hope to better understand, and that is what happens to language and memory and identity when it begins to change, and how love adapts when words no longer carry us. And Cindy, I think that's a great segue for you to introduce yourself. I can tell you what I discovered. You are let's put it this way, Eli and Edith Broad Professor of English over at Caltech. You're a literary scholar who's turned deeply into a personal storyteller, and you're the author, as I shared with the audience, both video and audio, of Finding the Right Words. Cindy Weinstein, welcome to Health Futures.
Thank you, Bob. It's really an honor to be talking with you today, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Well, I mean, first of all, your story, and this is what I love about your story, it's a personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's propelled you to write this book and really be on the journey that you're on right now. And certainly, you've spent your career studying language, literature, and the meaning.
Right.
And what originally drew you to this path. That's really, what I want to find out.
Sure.
And then I want to really do a dive into the book.
Great. That sounds wonderful. When I was 16, I spent a summer at Phillips Academy, Andover. My mother sent me there, and I read 12 books in 6 weeks. And I thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, is read. And I then realized that, you couldn't just do that. If you were going to be an English professor, you had to write. And
Right.
So my area of expertise and special interest is U.S. literature. And I've devoted my career at Caltech to teaching U.S. literature to my wonderful students and writing about it in a series of monographs. And at a certain point, I knew that I wanted to write a book in honor of my father. He was diagnosed in the mid-'80s with Alzheimer's. We didn't have precision diagnosis then. I have learned, courtesy of my co-author, Dr. Bruce Miller, who founded the Memory and Aging Center at UCSF, and the person with whom I wrote the book, that what my dad actually had was early-onset Alzheimer's with the logopenic variant, which means early onset before 65. He was in his 50s. And the logopenic variant is a rare form of Alzheimer's that assaults the language center of the brain. And language was one of the first things that my dad lost. He lost his positive mood as well. I was in my 20s, he was in his 50s, and he became really depressed. And, there's always a reason why, your mind doesn't, especially in the 80s, it didn't go to Alzheimer's. He was retiring and selling the business he had run with my uncle for decades. And we just all thought that that's what he was reacting to. I learned,
Cindy,
yeah,
Cindy, if I could,
sure, please.
and I know our audience would love to hear this too.
Yeah.
I'd like you to take a moment to really tell us about Jerry Weinstein.
I would love to.
And give me and our audience a sense of who your dad was, because he became somebody differently
right
after he got Alzheimer's. So,
right.
I only can imagine that, losing his voice was probably one of his greatest strengths, was his voice and not being able to have language anymore.
Right.
So I'd love for you to frame this for us so that we could really learn a little bit more about Jerry. And if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was his diagnosis, but I think he was 58 years old. Is that the
That's when he officially got the diagnosis, but he was definitely sick before then. And we know that the prodromal phase lasts a very long time. That is to say, when the disease is kind of percolating. So my mom knew.
Right.
My mom knew something was wrong. I didn't know it until he was 58.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your dad. Where did he grow up?
Okay.
What did he do professionally?
I love this question. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So my dad grew up in Newark, New Jersey. He went to the same high school as Philip Roth, which was Weequahic High School. He was a basketball player, and his nickname, he was kind of short, like maybe 5'6", 5'7", but they called him the Machine. That was his nickname. He was very proud of that. And he went to college on the GI Bill. He signed up for the Navy in World War II. And he was just like a beautiful human being. And the term daddy's girl doesn't really, it's not quite woke anymore, but when I was growing up, it really captured who I was. We would go to the Knicks basketball games together. I loved him so much that I even watched golf with him and bowling. And
there were some very good Knicks teams that you probably were seeing there in the 60s and 70s.
Walt Frazier,
Frazier, exactly.
Earl the Pearl. Wilt Chamberlain, DeBusschere, Bradley. I mean, it was incredible. So I was a complete Knicks fan. I have an older brother who wasn't into sports, so my father taught me all about sports. I taught my husband all about football. He knew nothing. And
it's so much fun.
Every Tuesday night, my dad and I would go out for dinner together. My mom would go to the Y. And at first, Tuesday nights were my sister, my brother, and myself. And then my sister went to college, and then it was just my brother and myself. And then for a long time, it was just me and my dad. And he was a real people person, and we would go to dinner, and he would always know someone. He would we didn't have this expression then, I don't think, but he worked the room. And he loved to sing and dance. He was an avid member of the temple and would be in the plays at the temple. He loved to bowl. He was in a bowling league every Monday night. And
what did he do professionally? What was
he started a business with my uncle called Apex Electrical Supply Company in New Jersey, northern New Jersey. And it was kind of like a rags to riches story. These places barely exist anymore. Home Depot, Lowe's took all those small businesses over.
Right.
And he sold electrical supplies, wiring, all this lighting, for buildings and stuff. And one of my favorite things was to go to the office with him when I was little and play on the Selectric typewriter and answer the phone. Apex Electrical Supply, can I help you? So my dad was just so good to me, so full of love, and uh, losing. I never lost his love. I knew that even when he got sick, even when he couldn't tell me he loved me, even when I think he probably didn't know who I was as an individual. I always knew he knew I was someone he loved.
Mm,
And that that foundation never crumbled. And that was very important to me. Um,
sure,
yeah.
sure.
So I spent a lot of time with my dad. Uh, I remember when I got into graduate school to Berkeley, I got the acceptance letter, and then there was also another piece of paper that like had the job market results in it. And that was in
Hmm.
the 80s. Now, God only knows, but he said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, not go to law school and get a job?" And I said yes, and he did everything he could to support me. He was so proud of me.
Mm,
So he was just a wonderful human being. Wonderful. And
well,
yeah.
personally, I'm a girl dad, so I
Uh,
certainly get the relationship. I have three daughters, so it's amazing, having a daughter and what that does as a dad. It really, it's something that you really can't even put into words. And
right.
I know that I know that you were very special to him, and now talking to you, I know that he was very special to you.
Absolutely.
You know, it's interesting. We live in a world where words matter, and that's something that you are very gifted in
Thank
because you
you.
write and you teach and I really, it sounds like to me too with your dad, he had this gift, as you said, working the room. He had very strong interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
There's probably a friend that he had met. Anyone that met him became his
Right.
friend right away.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how, the fact that he lost that ability, how that shaped, his identity, and really, when that diagnosis finally came, like you said, your mother knew,
Right.
you just didn't get that formal diagnosis.
Right.
And I know enough about Alzheimer's, having served on the board for the Banner Alzheimer's Institute for 10 years and having friends like Dr. Danny Cabral and Dr. Eric Ryman and Dr. Pierre Theriault. I've learned so much about it.
Hmm.
For me, what was that feeling like for you? I mean, words matter, and now you couldn't get those words from your
Right.
dad.
Uh, I was in Berkeley getting my PhD when my dad was getting really sick. And
Hmm.
so the interactions that we had over the phone like were one of the first things to go. And my dad and I used to kibitz and just like, talk all the time. And he couldn't get off the phone fast enough. And the conversation was monosyllabic, and then he would give my mom the phone. It was much easier when I saw him in person because sometimes people with Alzheimer's, especially if they are able to read other people very well, which my dad did, he could feign understanding, so he was able to pretend that he understood much more than he did when we were in person, but over the phone, that was not possible. So the communication over the phone became very difficult, and he would type me letters that had lots of typos. His handwriting was always atrocious. It got worse. And then what I started doing was writing him letters. And that was very important to me, even if he couldn't read them. Like I needed to reach out to him in whatever way I could. I tried to get to Florida as much as I possibly could. And one of the really poignant things was I visited Florida once, and my dad was always a neatnik, and he had in his nightstand all of the letters I had written him in a Ziploc bag. He had opened them with his letter opener, which I remember him using when he would open the bills and pay the bills. And I have those now, and they are precious to me. And I included some of them in the book. So we didn't know then, and this is a lot of why I want to do as much outreach as I can and talk to people like you and Dr. Cabral. We didn't know sort of the power of music. So when my mom and I would visit him in the nursing home, like we didn't have like a playlist that we could listen to together. No one knew that music was so deeply embedded in the brain that people could lose language, but like be able to sing their favorite songs. We didn't know about, like pet therapy or playing balls or Legos might have been too difficult, but all the other things that one can do that don't rely on language, that help you connect with your loved one who's losing words. And
Cindy, you mentioned music, and I always think of the movie Alive Inside, I think it was called, and that was the one that Daniel Cohn, the social worker in New York, put together. And, for those that have not seen that, you should definitely take an opportunity to see it, because as you're describing, Cindy, the patients that they depicted would be in this world of silence,
right?
And they couldn't speak a word,
right?
But at the same time, once they heard the music, they like all of a sudden came alive,
right?
It's fascinating what music does, and
right.
And obviously you've studied this, and I know there's a feeling probably of remorse that you didn't know what you know now back then.
Right.
Because you feel like you missed out on some of the borrowed time that you could have had.
Exactly.
If you could have awakened him, if you would, with the music.
Absolutely. There's also research on dance as an intervention. I'm actually writing another memoir on gardening. And there's some very interesting work being done on the relationship between gardening and cognition. So there are all these activities that don't depend on words.
It's amazing. And Cindy, if I can just add, I am caring for a retired physician who had early onset. And unfortunately, it was before 50. I think he may be in his early 50s now. And he's an artist. He wasn't before.
Right.
He wasn't before, but now he paints, and the art that he creates is really powerful and meaningful. It's a side of him that the family never ever saw.
Actually, my co-author Bruce Miller studies that there's a relationship in some cases of frontotemporal dementia, which has been in the news quite a bit because that's what Bruce Willis has. The relationship between FTD and artistic, a kind of, I don't know, latent artistry. And there's a beautiful play that someone I know wrote called Unraveled, which is about exactly this. And there's an attempt to kind of counter in some of the research a deficit model of dementia and try and not romanticize it or sentimentalize it in any way, but to think about when one circuitry in the brain starts closing down, are other circuits activated? And so there's some very interesting research. In fact, Bruce Miller thinks that there's a connection between Alzheimer's and empathy, and that his patients with Alzheimer's have an increased ability to empathize. So that's, yeah, interesting.
Right, so through our discussion here,
Yeah.
you have brought up Dr. Bruce Miller,
Right,
and he's a leading neurologist
Yeah.
in this space.
right,
And I really, for me and for our listeners and viewers,
yeah.
how did that relationship between the two of you begin?
Thanks for asking that. It took me probably 10 years to find Bruce. I was hoping maybe someone at Caltech would be a co-author, but the closest we come to studying dementia is some Parkinson's research. In any event, I was talking to a neurologist at Santa Barbara who liked the chapters I had sent him, but he said he didn't have time to write it with me and I should really contact Bruce Miller. So I sent an email to Bruce, and I was going to be in Berkeley. And Bruce said, why don't you come to UCSF? And I'd love to meet you. And we hit it off right away. And he said the magic words, which were, do you want to learn some science? No one at Caltech had actually ever asked me that. And I said, I would love to, because I had this intuition that maybe learning some of the science would help me figure out something. And I can talk more about that. And I said, I'd love to. And he said, we've got this interdisciplinary cohort program. You should apply. I applied, I got in, and I studied neurology for a year with Bruce and
Wow.
other neurologists at UCSF. I got to play medical school student for a year. Caltech gave me a sabbatical to do it. And that's when I got the bulk of the writing done. I would meet with Bruce maybe once a month, and we would share pages and talk about my dad. And that's how the book came to be.
Wow. And I think it's fascinating that you took sabbatical and you studied neurology. And for me, I would love to understand what Dr. Miller was able to help you understand on what was happening with your dad.
Right.
Obviously, we all have questions, but now you've got
Right.
this relationship with this neurologist who is widely known for the work he does in this field.
Right.
What did he help you understand with your dad?
He helped me understand a bunch of things. And this is in the absence of MRIs and PET scans and the data that we had in the 80s when my dad was getting diagnosed. Like, that was not available in 2018,
I mean,
19.
For our listeners and viewers, the only way you could get a positive diagnosis back in the 80s and 90s that your loved one had Alzheimer's was through autopsy.
Right.
They could not view what they could do today.
Right.
So I just want to kind of set the table.
That's
here.
great.
Yeah.
Right. So much of what Bruce did was rely on his expertise and he, said this was speculative, but he was confident in the diagnosis. So what did he give me? He gave me early onset Alzheimer's with the leukopienic variant. And that was huge because Alzheimer's was just such it was a black box. And having those words, having that precision was, I guess, like as a daughter, it just kind of put a bunch of things in place for me, especially the logopenic variant, the word finding part. So getting a precision diagnosis was enormous. And I write in the book how I almost cried when we were talking about it because I said, how do you know? how do you know that's what he had? And he said, well, the way you talk about your dad. Like, I know. And that was just remarkable to me. He gave me, mm, he gave me, and all the neurologists at UCSF did, and the program I was in, gave me a vocabulary that wasn't about my grief and my pain, but it was about my dad's. And it wasn't
Mm,
about my brain, which I was so sick of. I was so sick of it because I was like in this hall of mirrors with my sadness and I couldn't find a way out. And this is what I mean by learning the science. What it did was it put the focus on my dad, which is where it belonged. And it helped me. He couldn't articulate what was happening, but it gave me words to understand what was happening. And I should also say, and maybe your listeners would be interested in this, my mother didn't want us to tell my dad what he had.
mm,
So that made the process more complicated. And
sure it did.
she
Yeah.
did it because she was sure he would kill himself if he knew. And he had indicated he didn't know about Alzheimer's, but along the way in his life, I remember him saying things like, if this happens to me, like, I want to know. So, my mom was right. If he could have held on to the diagnosis long enough, I think he would have taken his own life.
Mm,
But that fact, made things, and my mom could not have known that this would be difficult in certain ways on her children, but it was. So
mm,
when my dad would be able to say, like, I can't remember X, I couldn't say what I wanted to say, and I would just say, well, you remember the important things, which was true. You remember the important things, and who cares if you don't know, like, what you had for breakfast? It doesn't matter. But, it did to him. So I know that's kind of a tangent, but I have talked to other people um, whose families have wanted to keep the diagnosis a secret, as it were. I mean, maybe that's not quite so much the thing now, but it it was when my dad was sick.
so I guess one of my questions for you is
Uh-huh.
collaborating with Dr. Miller
Yeah.
and knowing that you went through this journey with your dad,
Yeah.
have you processed your dad's decline maybe and emotionally different now that you know
Yeah.
what you know
Yeah.
versus at
Right.
that time you did know? I mean, obviously, you're connecting all the dots after,
Right.
and now in this you know after chapter, if
Right.
you would,
Right.
post-mortem,
Right.
are you processing this
Right.
emotionally differently than you did back then?
Right. I just want to say one other thing that I learned from Bruce and the other neurologists and the people in my cohort was that Alzheimer's is not just about memory. Early onset Alzheimer's is definitely not just all about memory, but it's about mood, it's about behavior, it's about spatial disorientation.
Hmm.
It's so I thought the first chapter of the book was going to be on memory. It turned out to be the last chapter. So, like, Bruce taught me about the disease. So I just wanted to say that. And then in terms of processing, what I say in the preface, which I wrote after having written the book, I wrote the preface. And what I realized was that Bruce, he sat Shiva with me for a year. And that when my dad died, I was so disconnected, so like dissociated from the experience. Cause like when you are sitting Shiva, you usually just kind of sit around and tell stories and eat salty food and, laugh about happy memories. And it was as if my dad's life began with a diagnosis and ended with a diagnosis, but that wasn't true. But I couldn't get there until like 25 years later when I wrote the book. And so the last chapter is me kind of remembering all those things I told you about my dad at the start of our conversation.
Right.
And I think like the processing is always happening. And I call myself like, I'm a patched tire, right? And I don't think like you get over things, like you do, but you don't. Like there's some things like hopefully I won't forget that are just
Right.
kind of scalded into my brain, images, moments. And those are the things I write about in the book. And I can look at them now. I can look at them straight in the eye and not want to dissolve. And so if that's what processing is, yes. And then like doing podcasts like this, doing talks in health humanities programs, going to senior care centers. I know this is what my dad would have wanted me to do, to help people with the knowledge that I gained to translate neurology. I feel like I'm a translator because I know my dad would not want other people to suffer the way he did. And if I can help in any way in talking about my grief and my suffering, if any of that helps, that's what my dad would have wanted. So that's why I do it.
And that's exactly what I was thinking at the time. I mean, it helps you with your grief and your suffering,
Right.
but it helps so many others.
Right.
Because, I'm a big advocate, and I will tell you, and I think you know this, that anyone that gets a diagnosis, whether it be Alzheimer's, whether it be Parkinson's, whether it be cancer, I mean, the biggest challenge that we run into with our older adults is that they are oftentimes in the sea of denial.
Right.
And they're not accepting of it.
Right.
And the one piece that I'm a big advocate of, and you're doing this by writing this book and speaking like you do and doing my podcast, is support groups.
Right.
Being able to talk to others that have been in your shoes, that
Right.
have walked that journey,
Right.
who know what you're going through. I've had the pleasure of getting to know and serve on a advisory council with Dr. Pauline Boss. And I'm sure you know Dr. Boss wrote the book Ambiguous Loss.
Right.
And you live that ambiguous loss.
Right.
And people don't really understand what that means, ambiguous loss. And basically it's the person is a vessel of who they used to be, and you mourn and lost them. And for me, I was wondering, is there a moment when you realize words were no longer the primary way you could connect with your dad? And how did you connect with your dad when you could no longer use those words?
Right.
Because words certainly are your superpower.
Right.
And his was his superpower in a very different way in his relationships and in his interactions.
Right. So I never, when he was alive, learned that words didn't matter. And it was only after I wrote a book, finding the right words, and learned some neurology, that I realized that words only get you so far. They're incredibly important. And I should say, I love words. And one of the reasons Bruce and I wanted to write the book was to help people with dementia and their caregivers have words. So at a certain point, like it was really important to me to have a glossary in the back of the book, like hippocampus, amygdala, executive function. There's some Yiddish in there and some literary criticism too.
Yeah, there is.
But I wanted caregivers and their loved ones to be able to go to the neurologist armed with words that they were going to hear and feel empowered and not, I mean, the diagnosis is crushing enough. And then if you have a doctor who just assumes that you know what they're talking about, it can really go south fast. And so I wanted people to have these words to just strengthen them, right? And so on the one hand, like words are incredibly important, but I didn't realize their relative irrelevance when my dad was alive. I mean, it's not like I went to the nursing home and nattered on and on. I knew enough not to do that. And so I think because I didn't know about music and I didn't know about pets and I didn't know about Play-Doh and I didn't know about gardening or what have you, but I knew about touch. I knew about hugs and I knew about kisses and like that's what I had. And so that's how I connected with him. That was my repertoire. And that's probably the most important repertoire of all, right? But of course, I wish I had done more. I wish I had done that more.
I mean, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
And it sounds like that replaced, obviously, language for you, is to be able to touch and be able to be there and show up and be a part. I
exactly.
mean, it's good for you. It was good for you, and it was certainly good for him as
Absolutely.
well. What do you believe we underestimate how much can still be communicated without words? Because we are a society that tries to use words all the time, and you know, what do you surmise that we underestimate?
So it depends on the person. Like, so I was just talking about the importance of words. So like the caregiver, you mentioned the D word, denial. So here's where words and I think writing, and I don't mean writing chapters with, lots of fancy language. I mean putting on the page your experience as a caregiver or someone if they have mild cognitive impairment and can still write and want to write. If you put it on the page, you can't deny it. And so I encourage caregivers to write down hard things because if you write it, it's there, it's real. And also I have encouraged people to write down the happy things that can happen even after the diagnosis, but also before. Because the weird thing is, like my dad's memory was going and mine was too. Because I forgot or I kept hidden all these really happy memories with my dad because they were just too painful to confront. So I believe words matter, but with someone who doesn't have words, it's hard to know because people are encouraged quite rightly, like if you're in a nursing home and let's say you're talking to a caregiver or a staff person at the nursing home, do not talk about the patient in the third person as if they're not there because, and I couldn't get in my dad's mind, but you just never know when a click is going to happen. And you want to acknowledge agency whenever possible, the agency of the person who's ill.
100%.
You know,
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're bringing this up because,
Thank you.
I'm serious because my caregivers and my care coordinators a lot of times see the adult child talking about their loved one, their parent, and they're not actually encouraging their parent to be a part of that conversation or even listening.
Right.
And it's something that we really need to be mindful that this person is still present. We should include them whether they can process it or not.
Right.
Let's assume that they can be a part of that conversation.
Exactly.
And it's what we call respect, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I think of that movie Finding Alice or whatever that was.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was really, really powerful for me to see that. And
Right.
I see it in the work we do, but they really exemplified the fact that that person's still there. They're there. They may not, they have a brain, disorder, if you would.
Right.
They are still there, and we should show that respect and include them in any of the conversations we have about their care and about their medical journey that they're on.
Exactly. And I think, and this is where staff are just so vital, right? If a adult child starts talking about their parent in the third person, but it's something that they don't want their parent to hear, you leave the room and have the discussion, outside. So that feeling of objectification, the person with the disease is experiencing so much, that they don't need to experience that too. I think, I don't know, this isn't exactly to your point, but just, it's so hard for staff. Like, it's so hard, but I just think about, like showering someone with dementia, right?
Yeah.
I know that's a big thing.
It's a challenge.
It's not really the worst thing in the world if a person doesn't shower all the time. I mean, it can be if there's an infection or they're always there are always exceptions, right? But I think, and this is kind of cliched, but trying to meet the person with dementia where they are, it's very hard. And I think you need to shed a lot of your assumptions about things. But you can become a better caregiver if you're able to do that. So I think showering is one. I'm sure you deal with this all the time, right?
Showers are one of the hardest ones just because it is scary.
Yeah.
And, we have to really, really understand how to get through that. One of the things that people often do, and they don't really understand, and I've learned this about the disease, is, they hear that it's really important to redirect, right?
Uh-huh.
So, if somebody is in this state, they have this diagnosis and they want, let's say, in this case, I'll say they want to see their mom.
Yeah.
But their mom has passed away, and their mom passed away 25, 30 years ago.
Right.
The typical person that understands redirecting will say, I don't want to talk about that. Hey, let's go get lunch, or let's go out to the garden.
Right.
No, this person's fixated on talking about their mom.
Right.
They want to see their mom.
Right.
So we need to validate that.
Right.
We need to say, I know you want to see your mom, and you know what? Your mom is busy right now,
right,
and we can't really get over to see her.
Right.
But and now is an opportunity to redirect and say, we haven't had lunch. Let's go into the kitchen and make lunch together.
Right.
And change that subject.
Right.
But we need to, as caregivers, family caregivers and professional caregivers, we need to go through that validation first.
Right.
At the feelings that they're going through.
Right.
And not dismiss those, because to them, it's real.
Right.
And the desire and emotions are real.
Right.
So we need to address them.
Absolutely. And like once upon a time, I'm sure you know this. When I was at UCSF, they showed us a film of people with dementia and a caregiver kind of leading a group. And someone did exactly what you're saying, like, I want to see my mom. And the response was, your mom is dead. And
Right.
then the person re-experiences the grief of losing their mother all over again. And so that's not a good that's not a good way to go. I mean, it's just so
No.
so silly. And so what we talked about in the group after that film was having photos. You want to see your mom? Let's have some photographs of your mother, or what do you let's talk about your mother. Just exactly what you're saying, like acknowledge it. Acknowledge it. I think that's crucial.
100%.
Yeah.
So there's part of the podcast I'd like to do is I'd like to get maybe to know a little more of the human side of you. And I haven't
Okay.
prepared you, but
Okay.
I want to give some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And certainly a lot of them pertain to this journey that you're on, this book.
Okay.
And really, I love that you're doing this. And
Thank you.
this is so personal to you. And you've done a lot of studying and research. And what I love about what you're doing, Cindy, is you're helping so many others that are going
Thank
through this
you.
journey
Thank you.
that don't know what's ahead. And I know deep down inside, Cindy, you wish you had the knowledge that you have today back then.
Right.
But you know what? You have this gift now that you can help people with the things that you've learned over time and be able to share those things that you've learned and the tricks to the trade and how important music is and how important art is and all the things that can really make that journey the best it can be.
Right.
And really at the end of the day, I mean, that's what really matters, is being able to help those families, those individuals through that last chapter in their journey of life.
Totally.
It doesn't have to be horrible.
Right.
It can be really good.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, there are supposedly like 70 different dementia types of diagnoses out there. But the larger one is Alzheimer's. It represents 2/3 or more. But as you said, frontal lobe, FTD is it comes with its challenges, especially with behaviors.
Right.
And those are the things that you just need to know and have knowledge about. So here are a couple of questions that I definitely want to fire off to you. So
go ahead.
They're light.
Okay.
So one word that best describes your dad.
Generous.
A moment with your dad that you will never forget.
Playing golf with him in Florida when I was a teenager and being so bad that I threw the ball from place to place and we were just cracking up on the golf course.
Oh, I love that. A book that changed your life.
Moby Dick.
What does connection mean to you today?
That's really interesting. It means a couple things. It means doing outreach. I connect with people who are going through this as caregivers through Hilarity for Charity. I do a support group called Keeping Each Other Company, Caregiving and Grief. So that's like one kind of connection. The other is teaching my students, connecting with them, loving that. And then connecting with my husband and my children and our dogs. And then connecting in my garden. That was a long answer.
It is a long answer, but I will tell you, especially the dog and garden husband. I mean, that's you and I are definitely friends. We're dog lovers. I mean, for sure.
Okay.
What should caregivers stop doing today?
they should stop beating themselves up.
What should they start doing today?
Being kind to themselves and knowing they're doing the best they can.
How about that? What did your father teach you without words?
Just the power of enduring love.
If you had one more conversation with your dad, what would you say?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I think I would say, I'm so sorry. I couldn't tell you what was wrong with you, and that the choice you might have made to end your life was taken away from you. And I love you. And I love you. I mean, obviously, I love you.
Of course.
Yeah.
I love you. What does finding the right words mean to you today?
Boy, these are hard.
Well, they're deep, and
Yeah,
you know what?
no, they're really good. I think it means, so there's this expression, I'm Jewish, but I'm going to invoke another, like, what would Jesus do? So
Yeah.
what would
Moses do?
Right. What would my dad want me to do? And if I can find that, if I can get to that, I've got the right words.
I like that.
Thank you.
So I'll give you a couple just easy ones. There's coffee or tea.
Oh, coffee.
Beach or mountains?
Oh, beach.
All right. Cindy Weinstein. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Same.
And
thank you, Bob.
This book right here, Finding the Right Words, it's a guide for all of us that are navigating relationships, or should I say relationship loss, and what it truly means to connect. I want to thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me here on my podcast, Health Futures. And, you're helping all of us find the meaning. And when words fall short, Cindy Weinstein helps us find those words.
Oh,
I can't thank you enough. You're my new friend.
Oh, thank you,
what?
Bob.
I hope our listeners, have really gravitated and really learned some of the essences that you have really put together, not just in my podcast, but the book. But I encourage you to get the book. You can pick it up. You can get it on Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a great book because it is Cindy's journey, but it also is written by this incredible neurologist, Dr. Bruce Miller, and who's really been we'll call it your first mate, your guardian angel.
Yeah.
You're really helping you through this journey and processing what you've learned. So,
right.
So Cindy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
Make
so
it a
much,
great
Bob.
day.
Thank you.
And for our listeners and viewers, stick around. Next week, we'll be back with our next guest at Health Futures. Take care. Make it a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm Bob Roth, reminding you that living well isn't just about years, it's about the quality of life and connections. Follow and share the show, and join us next time for more on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life.